Jake Morrison walked into the briefing room with his coffee still steaming in his hands. The message had come at 5 in the morning and marked urgent, which usually meant someone somewhere had made a very expensive mistake. He sat down across from Admiral Kate Phillips and waited for the bad news. "Jake, we have a situation," the Admiral began, sliding a datapad across the metal table. "The Galactic Council has officially requested human assistance with the Kethter and Vex conflict." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. The war between those two species had been going on for over 200 years. 3 different council mediators had tried to end it, and all 3 had barely escaped with their lives. The Kethter were 8-foot-tall reptilian warriors who settled disputes with claws and teeth, while the Vex were a hive-mind insectoid, species that viewed everything through cold mathematical logic. Both sides considered humans to be weak, soft mammals who had only recently discovered space travel. "They want us to send a diplomat," Admiral Phillips continued. "Someone who can think outside the box." Jake scanned the briefing documents on the pad. The conflict centered on mining rights in what both species called the neutral zone, though neither side treated it as particularly neutral. The Kethter claimed the territory by right of conquest, while the Vex argued they had mathematical proof of prior settlement. Every attempt at negotiation had ended with threats, posturing, and in one memorable case, actual violence. "Ma'am, with respect, what makes the Council think we can succeed where their best diplomats failed?" Jake asked. Admiral Phillips smiled, but it was not a happy expression. "Because, Captain Morrison, they are not sending you." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Then who?" "Lisa Martinez." The name took a moment to register. Lisa Martinez was the head chef aboard the diplomatic vessel Use Harmony. She was a former Marine who had left the service after her tour ended and somehow found her way into the ship's kitchen. She was known throughout the fleet for 2 things: making excellent food and having zero patience for military protocol. "A chef," Jake said slowly. "They want to send a chef to negotiate between 2 warrior species who have been trying to kill each other for 2 centuries. The Council's exact words were that they needed someone who could bring different perspectives together." "Admiral Phillips?" replied. Command reviewed her file. "Martinez has successfully mediated disputes between 17 different alien species aboard the Harmony. Apparently she has a talent for getting people to talk." Jake thought about the few times he had met Lisa Martinez. She was small, maybe 5'4", with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She spoke with a slight accent that he had never been able to place and had the unsettling habit of treating admirals and privates exactly the same. Most importantly, she seemed completely unimpressed by alien physiology, no matter how intimidating. "Does she know about this assignment?" Jake asked. She volunteered. That was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. Lisa Martinez was either very brave or very foolish, and Jake was not sure which quality would be more useful in this situation. The Admiral pulled up a star chart on the wall display. "The meeting is set for Starbase Concordia in the neutral zone. Both delegations have agreed to attend, mostly because the Council threatened to cut off trade agreements if they refused. You will escort Martinez to the station and provide security during the negotiations." Jake studied the star chart. Concordia was a massive space station built specifically for interspecies meetings. It had neutral territory status and enough firepower to discourage bad behavior, but it was also surrounded by empty space and very far from any backup. "What are our rules of engagement?" he asked. "Keep Martinez alive," Admiral Phillips said. "Beyond that, try not to start a war." Jake finished his coffee and stood up. "When do we leave?" 3 hours. "The Harmony is already being prepared for departure." Jake made his way to the docking bay where the UES Harmony waited. The ship was sleek and white, designed more for comfort than combat. It carried a small crew and was equipped with the latest diplomatic communication systems. More importantly, it had what was reportedly the best kitchen in the human fleet. He found Lisa Martinez in that kitchen, calmly preparing what looked like enough food for a small army. She wore a simple white chef's coat and had her graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she saw him, she smiled and wiped her hands on a towel. Captain Morrison, she said. I heard you would be joining us for this trip. Chef Martinez, Jake replied. Are you ready for this? Lisa gestured to the prep work covering every surface of the kitchen. I've been reading about Kethter and Vex dietary requirements for the past week. Did you know that both species are primarily carnivorous but have completely different approaches to food preparation? Jake had not known that, and he was not sure why it mattered. Martinez, these species have been at war for 200 years. They consider humans to be inferior life forms. What makes you think you can succeed where trained diplomats have failed? Lisa paused in her chopping and looked at him with those sharp brown eyes. Captain, have you ever noticed that people argue less when they are eating good food? I suppose. The Kethter have a warrior culture built around shared hunting and communal feasts. The Vex have a collective society that values efficiency and optimal resource distribution. Both cultures understand the importance of food, they just approach it differently. Jake was beginning to understand why Command had chosen her, even if he still thought the plan was insane. And you think you can use that? I think, Lisa said, returning to her prep work, that nobody has ever tried to feed them properly before. The journey to Starbase Concordia took 4 days. Jake spent most of that time reviewing tactical scenarios and security protocols. Lisa spent it in the kitchen, experimenting with recipes and studying cultural files. By the 3rd day, the entire ship smelled like a mixture of spices that Jake could not identify but found strangely comforting on the final day of travel. Jake found Lisa standing in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Concordia was visible in the distance, a massive structure that looked like a metal city floating in space. Second thoughts? He asked. Lisa shook her head. I keep thinking about something my grandmother used to say. She always told me that the fastest way to understand someone is to cook with them. Jake looked at the approaching station and wondered if Lisa's grandmother had ever met any 8-foot-tall reptilian warriors. Martinez, what exactly are you planning to do when we get there? Lisa smiled and headed back toward the kitchen. I'm going to cook, Captain, and I'm going to get them to help me. Starbase Concordia was even more impressive up close than it had looked from space. The massive station stretched for miles in every direction, with docking bays that could accommodate ships from dozens of different species. Jake guided the UES Harmony into their assigned berth while Lisa packed her equipment into several large cases. You sure you need all that? Jake asked, watching her load what appeared to be an entire portable kitchen. Trust me, Lisa replied, checking her knife. Roll for the 3rd time. I have learned that being prepared is half the battle. The station's main conference hall was designed to intimidate. The ceiling stretched up 3 stories, and the walls were covered with symbols from every major galactic civilization. A massive oval table dominated the center of the room, with seats sized for different alien anatomies. Jake positioned himself near the back wall where he could watch all the entrances, while Lisa set up at a smaller side table. The Kethter delegation arrived first. War Speaker Zrakthul entered the room like a force of nature, his 8-foot frame covered in dark green scales that caught the light like armor. His yellow eyes swept the room, taking in every detail, before settling on Lisa with what looked like disdain. 2 younger Kethter warriors flanked him, their claws clicking softly against the metal floor. So, Zrakthul rumbled in heavily accented standard, the soft mammals send a female to waste our time. Lisa looked up from her notes and smiled pleasantly. War Speaker Zrakthul, welcome to Concordia. I hope your journey was comfortable. The massive reptilian warrior snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. Comfort is for the weak. We are here because the Council threatens our trade routes, nothing more. Before Lisa could respond, the Vex delegation entered through the opposite door. 9 of 17 moved with mechanical precision, her insectoid form clicking and whirring with each step. Her compound eyes reflected the overhead lights like jewels, and her 4 arms moved independently as she carried various data devices. 2 smaller Vex drones followed behind her, their movements perfectly synchronized. Greetings, carbon-based entities. 9 of 17 said in a voice that sounded like it came through a computer translator. This unit has calculated that previous negotiations have achieved 0% success rate. We anticipate similar results. Jake watched as the two species took their positions on opposite sides of the table. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Both groups were armed despite the station's supposedly neutral status, and both seemed ready to use their weapons at the first sign of trouble. Lisa stood up from her table and walked to the center of the room. She looked impossibly small between the towering Kethter and the angular Vex, but she showed no sign of fear or uncertainty. "Before we discuss territory and mining rights," Lisa began, "I would like to understand what each of your peoples truly values." "Not politically, but culturally," Zrakthul's eyes narrowed. "What does a human know of Kethter culture?" "Very little," Lisa admitted. "That is why I am asking." 9 of 17 tilted her head with mechanical precision. "This line of inquiry appears inefficient. Cultural data is irrelevant to resource allocation disputes." Lisa nodded as if she had expected these responses. "War Speaker, your people are renowned as hunters and warriors. What makes a hunt successful? Is it just the kill, or is there something more?" Zrakthul was quiet for a long moment, his yellow eyes studying Lisa's face. "A true hunt requires skill, courage, and honor. But the greatest hunts are those shared with one's pack. The meat tastes sweeter when eaten with those who fought beside you." "Interesting," Lisa said, making a note. "And 9 of 17, your people have created one of the most efficient societies in the galaxy. How do you feed billions of individuals while maintaining such precise organization?" The Vex delegation leader processed this question for several seconds. "Optimal nutrition distribution requires mathematical precision. Every individual receives exactly the nutrients required for peak performance. Waste is eliminated through careful calculation and resource management." Lisa made another note, then looked between the two groups. "So one culture values the shared experience of hunting and eating together, while the other values efficiency and optimal distribution? Both approaches have merit." "This is pointless," Zrakthul growled. "We did not travel here to discuss food preparation." "Actually," Lisa said, "that is exactly why you are here." The room fell silent. Jake's hand moved closer to his sidearm as both alien delegations tensed. "Explain," 9 of 17 demanded. Lisa walked back to her table and picked up a data pad. "I have spent the last week studying the disputed territory. The Kethter claim it contains rare metals needed for ceremonial weapons. The Vex claim it has the ideal conditions for establishing a new colony. But neither group has mentioned the most important resource in that region." "Which is?" Zrakthul asked. "Food," Lisa said simply. "The outer worlds in that system have some of the most diverse ecosystems in the galaxy. Perfect hunting grounds for species that value the chase. The inner worlds have optimal conditions for large-scale agriculture and protein farming." Jake watched as both delegations processed this information. It was clear that neither group had considered the region's biological resources as anything more than a minor detail. Lisa continued, "War Speaker, imagine hunting grounds where your warriors could face prey species that no Kethter has ever fought before. New challenges, new victories, new stories to share around the feast fires." Zrakthul's pupils dilated slightly, a sign of interest in his species. 9 of 17 imagine agricultural facilities that could feed 3 new hive clusters with 40% greater efficiency than your current food production systems. The Vex leader's compound eyes glittered as she processed the mathematical implications. "But," Lisa said, holding up a hand, "understanding the potential of these resources requires understanding how different species approach food and nutrition. I propose we adjourn for today and reconvene tomorrow in the station's kitchen facilities." "Kitchen facilities?" Zrakthul sounded confused. "I want to better understand your dietary requirements," Lisa explained. "If we are going to discuss sharing resources, I need to know what each species actually needs to thrive." 9 of 17 clicked thoughtfully. "This data could be useful for resource allocation calculations." "And," Lisa added with a smile, I would like to show you some human food preparation techniques that might enhance your existing nutritional systems. Jake watched in amazement as both delegations agreed to meet in the kitchen the next day. He was not sure what Lisa had planned, but he was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, her grandmother's advice about cooking together might actually work on a galactic scale. The station's kitchen facilities were much larger than Jake had expected. Multiple cooking stations lined the walls, each designed to accommodate different species and their unique dietary needs. Lisa had arrived early and set up 3 separate work areas with ingredients that Jake did not recognize. The smell in the air was complex and surprisingly pleasant. Zrakthel entered first, his massive frame filling the doorway as he surveyed the kitchen with obvious suspicion. His yellow eyes fixed on the various knives and cooking tools that Lisa had arranged on the counters. "This looks like a torture chamber," the Kethter warrior rumbled. Lisa laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise him. "Cooking can be a battle, war speaker, but it is one where everyone wins in the end." 9 of 17 arrived precisely on time, her mechanical movements taking her directly to the ingredient displays. She scanned each item with her compound eyes before turning to Lisa. "These biological materials appear to be in various stages of decomposition," the Vex leader observed. "That would be aging and fermentation," Lisa explained. "Controlled breakdown that enhances flavor and nutritional value. Very similar to your hive's protein optimization processes, but using time instead of technology." Jake positioned himself where he could see all 3 cooking stations. He still was not sure what Lisa planned to accomplish, but both alien delegations seemed genuinely curious about the setup. Lisa walked to the first station, which held what looked like large cuts of red meat. "War speaker, I obtained some Terran beef that has similar protein structures to your traditional hunt beast meat. May I show you how humans prepare meat for cooking?" Zrakthel approached cautiously, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "Humans do not hunt. How can you understand meat preparation?" "You are right that we do not hunt the way your people do," Lisa admitted. "But we have learned other ways to honor the animals that feed us." She picked up a sharp knife and began demonstrating basic butchering techniques. Her movements were precise and efficient, breaking down the large cut into smaller portions with practiced ease. Zrakthel watched intently, occasionally asking questions about specific cuts or techniques. "This is similar to field dressing," he admitted grudgingly, "though your blade work lacks the ceremonial elements." "Every culture has its own ceremonies," Lisa replied. "What makes Kethter meat preparation special?" Zrakthel was quiet for a moment, then began describing the ritual hunting songs and the specific way that successful hunters shared their kills with the pack. As he spoke, his posture relaxed slightly, and Jake noticed that his hand gestures became more animated. Meanwhile, 9 of 17 had moved to examine the second station, which was filled with various grains, proteins, and what appeared to be scientific equipment. "These measuring devices are quite primitive," she observed. "But very precise," Lisa said, joining her at the station. "Human cooking requires exact measurements for consistent results. Would you like to see how we calculate nutritional density?" Lisa began explaining her process for creating balanced meals, using mathematics that seemed to appeal to the Vex leader's analytical mind. She showed how different ingredients could be combined to maximize protein efficiency while maintaining flavor profiles that encourage consumption. "Fascinating," 9 of 17 clicked. "Your species has achieved optimization through trial and error rather than calculation. Both methods work," Lisa said. "Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected approaches." She moved to the third station and began pulling out spices and seasonings from Earth. "Now, I would like to try something experimental. War speaker, would you be willing to let me prepare your meat using some human techniques?" Zrakthel's eyes narrowed. "You want to contaminate hunt beast with alien substances?" "I want to enhance it," Lisa corrected. "These spices will not change the essential nature of the meat, but they might bring out flavors that are already there." She held up a small container of black pepper. "This spice increases the perception of other flavors without adding its own dominant taste." And this, she showed him garlic, helps break down tough fibers in meat, making it more tender. Zrakthul considered this for a long moment. Show me, Lisa began preparing a marinade, explaining each ingredient as she added it. The Kefter warrior watched closely, occasionally asking about specific measurements or techniques. When she began massaging the marinade into the meat, he seemed genuinely interested in the process. 9 of 17, Lisa called. Would you be willing to help me optimize a protein mixture using your mathematical approach? The Vex leader moved to Lisa's side with mechanical precision. Define the optimization parameters. Maximum nutritional density with enhanced flavor appeal, Lisa replied. The goal is to create something that provides optimal nutrition, but also encourage consumption through sensory satisfaction. 9 of 17 began calculating ratios with impressive speed, suggesting combinations and modifications that Lisa incorporated into her mixture. Jake watched as the two worked together, the human's intuitive approach blending surprisingly well with the Vex's mathematical precision. War Speaker, Lisa said after 20 minutes of preparation, your meat is ready for cooking. Would you like to try the human method? Zrakthul approached the cooking station where Lisa had set up a high-temperature grill. She showed him how to control the heat and timing to achieve the perfect balance of seared exterior and tender interior. The aroma that filled the kitchen made Jake's mouth water and seemed to have a similar effect on the Kefter warrior. The smell is acceptable, Zrakthul admitted. At the same time, Lisa and 9 of 17 were working with a protein processor that combined their calculated mixture into a paste that was then shaped and cooked using rapid heating techniques. The result looked nothing like traditional food, but it smelled surprisingly good. Efficiency increased by 32%, 9 of 17 announced after running calculations on her portable computer. Flavor enhancement appears significant, though quantification is difficult. Lisa smiled and looked between her two cooking partners. Now comes the real test. Would each of you be willing to try what the other has prepared? The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Jake's hand moved closer to his weapon as both alien species considered this unprecedented request. You ask us to consume food prepared by our enemies, Zrakthul said slowly. I ask you to try food prepared by fellow cooks, Lisa corrected. Food that you helped create. 9 of 17 tilted her head with mechanical precision. The nutritional content is known and appears safe for consumption. And, Lisa added, it would provide valuable data about the food resources in the disputed territory. How can you make decisions about agricultural and hunting potential without understanding what each species can contribute? Zrakthul rumbled thoughtfully. A warrior who refuses to scout the battlefield fights blind. Agreed, 9 of 17 clicked. Additional data improves decision-making accuracy. Lisa prepared small portions of both dishes and placed them on simple plates. She watched as Zrakthul cautiously tasted the Vex protein creation and 9 of 17 sampled the spiced hunt beast meat. The expressions on both alien faces were difficult to read, but neither immediately reached for weapons or showed signs of distress. Interesting, 9 of 17 said finally. The texture is different from our standard nutrition paste, but the efficiency is superior. Zrakthul chewed thoughtfully for a long moment. The flavor is ... complex, not unpleasant. It would make acceptable field rations. Lisa pulled out a bottle of wine that she had been saving for a special occasion. Excellent. Now, shall we discuss how your peoples might share the resources of the disputed territory? The wine bottle made a soft pop as Lisa opened it, the sound somehow cutting through the tension that still filled the kitchen. She poured 3 glasses, adjusting the portions based on what she knew about each species' tolerance for alcohol. Jake watched nervously as she handed drinks to 2 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. To new experiences, Lisa said. Raising her glass, Zrakthul examined the dark red liquid with obvious suspicion before taking a cautious sip. His yellow eyes widened slightly and he took another larger drink. This liquid has an interesting effect, he rumbled. It warms the blood without clouding the mind. 9 of 17 sampled her portion with mechanical precision, running quick calculations on her portable analyzer. Ethanol content is within acceptable parameters. The chemical compounds produce a mild relaxation effect. Lisa smiled and settled onto one of the stools around the kitchen island, gesturing for the others to join her. Now that we have shared food and drink, perhaps we can talk honestly about what each of your peoples really needs? Zrakthul remained standing but moved closer to the island. The Kethter require territory expansion. Our young warriors need new hunting grounds to prove themselves. The old worlds have been picked clean of worthy prey. Expansion is also necessary for the Vex, 9 of 17 added, perching on a stool with mechanical grace. Current population growth exceeds habitat capacity by 12% annually. New colony sites are required within 2 solar cycles. Lisa nodded thoughtfully, refilling their glasses. So you both need space, but for different reasons. War Speaker, tell me more about these hunting grounds. What makes prey worthy? Zrakthul's posture relaxed as he spoke about Kethter traditions. Worthy prey is cunning, dangerous, and strong. A hunt that offers no challenge produces no honor. The outer worlds of the disputed system have creatures that no Kethter has ever faced. New beasts mean new stories, new challenges for our youth. And 9 of 17, Lisa continued, what makes a good colony site for your people? The Vex leader pulled up a holographic display from her analyzer. Optimal colony placement requires specific mineral compositions for construction, adequate space for population density, and efficient resource distribution networks. The inner worlds of the disputed system have rare earth deposits that would support large-scale hive construction. Lisa set down her wine glass and looked between them. So the Kethter want the outer worlds for hunting, and the Vex want the inner worlds for colonies. Why exactly are you fighting over the same territory? There was a long pause as both alien leaders processed this question. Jake realized that Lisa had just pointed out something that apparently nobody had considered. During 200 years of conflict, the mining rights, Zrakthul said slowly. Both sides claim exclusive access to all worlds in the system. But neither of you actually wants the same worlds, Lisa observed. War Speaker, would hunting on the outer worlds be less enjoyable? If the Vex had colonies on the inner planets? Zrakthul considered this while taking another drink of wine. Hunting grounds require isolation from civilization. But if the soft shells stayed on the inner worlds and left the outer territories alone, it would not interfere with our hunts. And 9 of 17, Lisa continued, would your colonies be less efficient if the Kethter used the outer worlds? For hunting, the Vex leader ran quick calculations. Assuming no interference with mining operations or transportation routes, outer world activities would not impact colony efficiency. The distance would actually provide a security buffer. Lisa refilled their glasses again and pulled out her datapad. What if, instead of fighting over exclusive rights to the entire system, you worked together? Kethter hunters could provide security for Vex mining operations on the outer worlds. Vex technology could make mining more efficient on the inner worlds, increasing profits for both sides. Zrakthul snorted. Warriors do not work for insect creatures. Kethter security services would be contracted labor, Lisa corrected. Your people would be paid for protecting valuable assets. It would be like being hired for a very long, very well-paid hunt. 9 of 17's compound eyes glittered with interest. Kethter combat effectiveness would significantly improve. Security calculations. Reduced losses from predator attacks would increase operational efficiency by an estimated 18%. And, Lisa added, Vex technological improvements to mining equipment would increase mineral yields. Higher profits mean everyone makes more money. She stood up and began sketching on a large display board. Imagine this. The outer worlds become Kethter hunting preserves and training grounds. Young warriors from across the Empire come here to prove themselves against new prey. The Kethter establish permanent bases to support these operations. Zrakthul watched as she drew rough maps of the system. Permanent bases would require supply lines, maintenance facilities, and administrative centers. Exactly, Lisa said. Meanwhile, the inner worlds become major Vex colonies with advanced mining operations. The Vex need to transport materials and personnel between worlds, which requires reliable security. 9 of 17 began running calculations on her portable computer. Transportation security costs typically represent 15% of operational expenses. Contracting local security forces could reduce this to 8% while improving effectiveness. Lisa continued sketching, showing transportation routes between the outer and inner worlds. The Kefter get new hunting grounds and a steady income from security contracts. The Vex get prime colony sites and improved mining efficiency. Both sides get what they actually need instead of fighting over things they do not want. Zrakthul moved closer to examine the sketches. This would require trust between our peoples. Kefter and Vex have never worked together. But you just did, Lisa pointed out. You cooked together, shared food together, and found common ground. If you can do that in a kitchen, you can do it in space. 9 of 17 tilted her head thoughtfully. Cooperation would require extensive planning and coordination protocols. Which brings us to the next question, Lisa said with a smile. How do you maintain cooperation between two very different cultures over the long term? She refilled their glasses once more and leaned against the counter. In human experience, the best way to build lasting relationships is through regular cultural exchange. Kefter warriors could train with Vex tactical units to learn precision and coordination. Vex drones could participate in Kefter hunts to understand individual initiative and adaptive thinking. Learn from insect creatures? Zrakthul sounded skeptical. Learn from fellow warriors, Lisa corrected. 9 of 17, your people have survived and thrived through perfect coordination and efficient resource use. Those are valuable military skills. 9 of 17 processed this for several seconds. Kefter combat adaptability could improve. Vex tactical flexibility by quantifiable margins. And war speaker, Lisa continued, your people value strength and honor in battle. The Vex have qualities that could make Kefter warriors even more effective. Zrakthul rumbled thoughtfully, his yellow eyes focused on the sketches. Perhaps there is wisdom in learning new approaches to combat. Lisa pulled out her datapad and began typing. I propose a formal treaty with 3 main components: territorial division based on actual needs, economic cooperation through security contracts and mining partnerships, and cultural exchange programs to maintain long-term relations. She turned the pad so both alien leaders could see the preliminary agreement outline. The profits from the joint mining operations would fund the cultural exchange programs, creating a self-sustaining system for cooperation. 9 of 17 studied the numbers with obvious interest. The mathematical projections are encouraging. Zrakthul examined the territorial divisions. This would give us more hunting ground than we originally claimed. And it gives both sides exactly what they actually need, Lisa said. Plus, it creates ongoing incentives for cooperation instead of conflict. She looked at both alien leaders seriously. The question now is whether your peoples are ready to try something completely new. 3 days later, Jake stood in the station's main dining hall watching something that he was sure had never happened before in galactic history. The formal treaty signing was taking place not in a sterile conference room, but around tables loaded with food from 3 different worlds. Lisa had somehow convinced both alien delegations that the best way to celebrate a historic agreement was with a feast. The treaty itself was remarkable enough. The Kefter would establish hunting preserves and training facilities on the outer worlds of the disputed system, while the Vex would build their colonies and mining operations on the mineral-rich inner planets. Security contracts between the 2 species would provide steady income for the Kefter and reduced costs for the Vex. Most importantly, both sides would participate in cultural exchange programs designed to maintain cooperation over the long term. But watching Zrakthul carefully taste a Vex protein dish while 9 of 17 examined a perfectly grilled piece of hunt beast meat was something that Jake was sure no military academy had prepared him for. "This is acceptable," Zrakthul announced after finishing his portion. "The soft shells have created efficient field rations. Kefter food preparation techniques show promise for improving meal satisfaction among Vex workers." 9 of 17 replied with what Jake was learning to recognize as her version of enthusiasm. Lisa moved between the tables like a conductor, directing an orchestra, making sure everyone had enough food and drink while keeping the conversation focused on positive outcomes. She had spent the last 2 days working with both delegations to finalize treaty details, but more importantly, she had been teaching them to cook together. The breakthrough had come when Zrakthul suggested that young Kefter warriors might benefit from learning Vex precision techniques, while 9 of 17 calculated that Vex tactical units could improve their adaptability by studying Kefter combat methods. What had started as a territorial dispute had become a plan for unprecedented interspecies cooperation. Admiral Kate Phillips had arrived that morning to oversee the treaty signing, and Jake could see the amazement on her face as she watched the proceedings. She caught his eye and shook her head in disbelief before walking over to join him. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, "in my 40 years of military service, I have never seen anything like this." "Neither have I, Admiral," Jake replied, watching as Lisa demonstrated proper wine-pouring technique to a group of fascinated Vex drones. "The Galactic Council is calling it the most significant diplomatic breakthrough in 2 centuries," Admiral Phillips continued. 3 different council mediators failed to make any progress, and Chef Martinez has them planning joint military exercises. Jake nodded toward where Lisa was explaining fermentation processes to several young Kefter warriors. She has a gift for finding common ground. The formal signing ceremony began an hour later. Council Representative Wilson Blake had traveled from the capital to witness the historic moment, and his speech about peace and cooperation was everything Jake expected from a career politician. But the real ceremony happened when Zrakthul and 9 of 17 signed the documents using writing implements made from materials native to both their homeworlds. "This treaty represents more than territorial agreement," Zrakthul declared as he placed his mark on the document. "It represents the beginning of understanding between warrior peoples." 9 of 17 added her signature with mechanical precision. "This agreement demonstrates that optimal solutions often require cooperation rather than competition." Lisa stepped forward as both alien leaders finished signing. "And to celebrate this historic moment, I have one final surprise." She gestured to Jake, who helped her carry out a large bound volume that had been hidden behind the serving tables. The cover was decorated with symbols from all 3 cultures and bore the title, "The Galaxy's First Interspecies Cookbook, Recipes for Peace." "During our negotiations," Lisa explained, "we created dozens of new recipes that combine techniques and ingredients from Kefter, Vex, and human cooking traditions. This cookbook contains all of them, along with the cultural stories behind each dish." Zrakthul examined the book with obvious curiosity. "You recorded our hunting stories?" "Every one you told me," Lisa confirmed. "And 9 of 17, your efficiency calculations are included with each recipe to show optimal nutritional value." The Vex leader's compound eyes glittered as she scanned through the pages. "This data compilation is surprisingly comprehensive." Lisa smiled and opened to a page that showed a complex dish combining all 3 cooking styles. "Half the profits from this cookbook will fund the cultural exchange programs outlined in the treaty. The other half will support research into new interspecies cuisine techniques." Admiral Phillips leaned over to Jake. "She planned this entire thing, didn't she?" "I think she did," Jake replied, finally understanding the full scope of what Lisa had accomplished. The feast continued for several more hours, with representatives from both species trying foods they had never imagined eating. Jake watched as barriers that had existed for centuries dissolved over shared meals and friendly conversation. Young Kefter warriors were already making plans to visit Vex tactical training facilities, while Vex drones expressed interest in observing traditional hunts. As the evening wound down, Jake found Lisa cleaning up in the kitchen, humming quietly to herself as she organized the remaining ingredients. "You know," he said. When Admiral Phillips told me we were sending a chef to negotiate between two warrior species, I thought it was the craziest plan I had ever heard. Lisa laughed and continued packing her equipment. Sometimes the craziest plans work the best. What gave you the idea to use cooking as diplomacy? Lisa paused in her packing and looked thoughtful. My grandmother always said that you cannot hate someone whose food you have shared. I thought maybe that wisdom would work on a galactic scale. Jake helped her load the last of her equipment cases. The Council is already asking if you would be interested in mediating other conflicts. Are they now? Lisa smiled. Well, I suppose someone has to teach the galaxy how to eat together. 6 months later, Jake read reports that still amazed him. The joint Keftervex mining operations were exceeding all efficiency projections. 3 interspecies restaurants had opened on major trade routes, serving fusion cuisine that was becoming popular across a dozen systems. Most importantly, the cookbook had become a bestseller, funding educational exchanges that were changing how different species viewed each other. The final report in Jake's file was Lisa's after-action summary, which had become required reading at the Diplomatic Academy. Her conclusion was simple but profound. Traditional diplomacy focuses on what divides us. Culinary diplomacy focuses on what nourishes us all. Lisa Martinez had been promoted to ambassador for cultural cuisine exchange, a position that had not existed before she created it. Her official motto, printed on every copy of the cookbook, had become the unofficial slogan of human diplomatic efforts. A shared meal is the first step toward shared understanding. Jake smiled as he finished reading the report. Somewhere in the galaxy, a former Marine-turned-chef was probably teaching another group of aliens that the secret to peace was not just good intentions, but good seasoning. And somehow that made perfect sense.